This week's episode is sponsored by the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts in downtown St. Paul, presenting Mandy Patinkin, Being Alive with Adam Ben David on piano on April 19th and 21st. A Tony and Emmy award-winning performer, Being Alive presents the acclaimed actor, singer, storyteller in his most electrifying role, concert performer. Being Alive is a collection of many of Mandy's favorite Broadway and classic American tunes, from Irving Berlin to Stephen Sondheim, from Cole Porter to Harry Chapin. Mandy Patinkin takes you on a dazzling musical journey you'll never forget. For tickets and more information, go to ordway.org or click the link in the show notes. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jew Folk. This week I talked to Iola Kostrzewski, the new Minnesota Engagement Director for the ADL. We talk about the opportunity to help restart the ADL's presence in Minnesota, her unique family story, and generational trauma on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Iola, check out the new and improved TC Jew Folk merch store with newly designed hats, shirts, stickers, and tote bags that help you look fun and stylish and help support TC Jew Folk's mission at the same time. Check it out at tcjewfolk.com/store. Iola Kostrzewski, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to get to talk to you. I was looking at your LinkedIn a little bit, and you have... No, it's a good thing. It's good. It's fascinating because I've never seen, the start date and then ending in present on so many things at the same time.
Oh, yeah. I'm involved in a lot of things.
Okay, so let's start with the top of the list then, because obviously it's very important for what's going on in the Jewish world right now. You're the community engagement manager here in Minnesota for the Anti-Defamation League.
I am, and we like to say ADL now.
Okay.
It's like a silent rebranding.
Is
ADL,
it? A for the ADL.
ADL.
I like to, so I'm old school journalist. I like to spell out the acronym on the first reference. So we can now but that's fair. We can now switch to ADL. So you are the Minnesota Community Engagement Manager. I know the ADL has been sort of off and on trying to make some inroads back into Minnesota. How has it been taking this role on sort of as a solo practitioner here in Minnesota since the regional offices of Chicago?
By myself, yes. They were like, hey, you get this job, and then threw me by myself into the state. I was like, yay. It has been interesting. It's been very Minnesota nice, if that makes any sense.
Oh, that makes all the sense.
So people are like, oh yeah, and then you never hear from them again. People are like, congratulations, and I've never heard from them again. So it has been quite interesting. It's been fun. So it has been fun. So I do go back to Chicago every now and then when they allow me in the office. It's where I've learned bank buildings in Chicago have really good security compared to here in Minnesota where they're like, hey, yeah, just walk in. Here's all of our financial stuff. Yeah, it's you need key cards and stuff.
Wow.
It's really interesting.
All right.
It actually has been great. I right now am spending a lot of my time with coffees with people in the community, lunch, walks. I've been invite me to whatever so I can take the temperature. And if it has food, I am very, very happy. And if you provide childcare, it's even better. I will show up. We'll talk all the things. But no, it's been really, really fun. I come from a community engagement background.
Yes.
So this is just next level of I'm just continuing what I've always done.
I was going to say, that was sort of the common thread that weaves through your background is the community organizing.
I love people. I do love people. Yes.
You'd have to, I would think.
Yeah, you do, except I get peopled out. So, when I get home, I get in my bed, and I ignore everyone in my house. Because I've, had so many conversations, I'm peopled out. But no, I love community. I come from a community, family of being very involved in the community. So it's something I've just continued on.
What is obviously, it's a tough time to be a Jew in America now.
Yes.
For the vast majority of the Jewish community feeling a certain way about everything that's going on. What are you hearing from people in all of these conversations?
People are having a really hard time. I think that is across the board. No one has been it's been a really great time. No one has said that. It's
super
been
chill.
Great. No, it has been really hard. And I end up connecting with a lot with people with kids because I have kids. So like it just makes sense. You start talking about your kids or grandchildren. Yeah. And I'm realizing kids in schools, like we are hearing a lot about college, but like we're not talking enough about like your elementary, middle school, high school kids and like elementary kids. Like we have like 8-year-olds who are having to navigate this. And they're 8. Like they can barely like get dressed by themselves in the morning and now they have to go to school and experience anti-Semitism. But a lot of time they don't have the language for what they're experiencing. Right. So that has been interesting. But no, the people are not okay. We're not okay. But finding joy. It's been so like having these really hard conversations and like what people are experiencing, but then it goes into like so-and-so just got married or a bar mitzvah just happened. So like the snippets of like Jewish joy. Yeah. And that's been like really great. It just like gives me hope of like there's hope. And one day like maybe I won't have a job because like these things won't be happening. Right. Not anytime soon, though. No.
No, there's a reason the ADL has been around for quite as long as it has been. But I think you mentioned the joy, and I think that that's a really good reminder that life will go on, that life is still going on, and that, I hate using the word compartmentalize, but in a lot of ways it feels like that's what we have to do, is like there's the sadness and the mourning of October 7th and days since that we're feeling, but also having to make space for the good. Because if we can't make space for the good that's going on, it's an awfully difficult existence.
Yes. And for me, I have adapted the motto. Someone needs to make like a yard sign, but it's "We Can Dance Again." So I don't know if you saw the video of the DJ who was at the Nova Festival, and he came back to play, and the song that he was playing is "We Can Dance Again." Yep. And that has been my motto of like, these really bad things have happened, but like we can keep that joy going. We can dance again. And someone needs to make that like into a yard sign of like a silent protest, because no one is going to know like what it actually means. Unless you're Jewish, then you're like, oh, I know exactly what that means.
Right, which I think is probably, without the explanation, is a little more universal feeling and less likely to be, torn down.
Yes.
Or
exactly.
Vandalized in some way. I know there's been a lot of that with the Stand With Israel signs.
Yes, we've had a few torn down to the point where I'm like, I just need to go to like the Berry Center, because it's not JCC anymore.
No, it's the Berry Family Campus.
The Berry Family Campus, and just need to grab like a stack of those signs and just keep them on my porch and just like keep replacing them every single day because they get torn down, and just like keep replacing it because that's what's happening. And that was kind of like I was talking about it Friday. I was like, we need to have these signs because no one would know what we can dance again would mean versus like I Stand With Israel. Then your house gets egged, and I don't like cleaning egg off my house every single morning. So it'd be nicer if we had like a not better sign, but a sign that like no one can argue with.
Right.
Oh, that got down.
Yeah. No, that would be. It did. But no, it's like and that's sort of the glass half empty side of it. Is like we are juggling so many things, and that is the bummer of so much of it of being sort of publicly, outwardly Jewish or certainly pro-Israel in this time.
Yes.
Is that it's hard.
It is hard.
It's really hard.
It is so hard.
What was it about community organizing that really spoke to you? Is not just at ADL or any of the other things you've done, but just that as a sort of basic sort of starting point for a career and what you wanted to do?
It's people's stories. I love listening to like where people have come from, where they're going, what they've done, and just listening to their stories. And I think that has come from my mother. Okay. My mother would tell. I'll give some background.
Please.
I was adopted into a family here in Minnesota. And my mother who raised me was very interesting. One, she had a career, like she was a nurse at one point, an accountant at one point, like worked for Pearson Candy. Like, yeah, it was wild. Like,
wow,
so she
what a
showed
journey
me like
that is.
She like could do all the things.
Yeah.
And she retired early so she could do foster care, and she ended up adopting 4 children, myself included. But I remember the kitchen, which I think the kitchen for so many people is like the center of life. Food is the center of life. And in the kitchen telling me stories of like her growing up, And she grew up in Jim Crow South in Arkansas, Stevens, Arkansas. So I like to say Little Rock because people don't know where Stevens is.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, Little Rock is the nearest
Basically,
city.
okay.
And she would tell me these stories of her growing up. And a lot of time I didn't believe them because they would just be like, well, I mean, they were like really violent. It'd be like, so-and-so was like hung. And I'm like, oh, I'm like 8. So like, I didn't know how to process that. And then I got older and I was like, oh, crap, that was true. Like, yeah, like, oh, damn. But like, so some of the stories are like really, really, really sad. And then some of them were like really, really funny of like, they were farmers. So she'd be like, yeah, we had this pig to show. She claimed like she never told me this story, but I'm like, I didn't just get out of nowhere that you washed a pig in buttermilk so you could show him. I swear that was a story she told me. She's like, I have never told you that.
Show
like,
him like at a fair?
Yeah, like at a fair type thing. But she's like, I've never told you that. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you have. But storytelling was her way of sharing who she was with me. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm an adult and now that I'm a parent, I carry those stories with me. And listening to her and what I've learned from those stories, I have transferred that to the things that I do. So you'll look at my LinkedIn, you'll find like weird things that I'm doing. You're like, how did you get, like, I'm part of the Somali Farmers Association, like as their treasurer. And we were like, what are you doing there? And I'm like, it's the stories. Like, have you ever gone out to a community like farm at Horns Towers is where one of these farms were, and like listen to the elders? And like half the time, there's a language barrier. I don't speak Somali. But over some tea, you can understand a lot of things.
Right.
I love people's stories.
Yeah.
That's like the thing that keeps me going.
And I would think, please correct me if I'm wrong, I may be going out on way too narrow a limb here, but being someone who is adopted, I think you're the mother who raised you, telling you her stories is a way to sort of pass on her past, but also as a way for you to connect with her and her family and her background.
Yes. And I didn't see it at the time, but that is exactly what was going on. Because those are the stories I still tell to this day of, technically, that is not my background when we think about it, my lineage, but it is. Like, I've adopted those stories on. Those are my stories. Those are stories I tell my children. And I eventually at one point did reconnect with my original mother. I say original mother and not birth mother.
Okay.
And that's very on purpose.
Okay.
But I did reconnect with my original family. Mm-hmm. I have a connection with my original father to this day. Like, we've gone down for Thanksgiving, which has been really, really interesting. And so I'm taking on those stories as well, but it's been slower. And I tell people, I'm like, I've lost 2 mothers in like a period of 5 years. So after reconnecting with my original mother, it was not the reconnection like people dream of, like,
it's not the Hallmark story.
No, it's not the Hallmark story.
Ooh.
Mental health is a huge thing. Trauma is a huge thing. And I think as Jews, we know that, like, intergenerational trauma. And her story, she was Sephardic Jew, so they're originally from Morocco. They moved to Israel. They moved to New York. Everyone goes to New York. Like, everyone ends up in New York. And for some reason, my grandmother made the choice to come to Minnesota. I don't know why. Like, I'm just like, how do you go from desert to snow? Yeah. Like, the choice. But she came, and my maternal grandmother died suddenly from a heart defect. Okay. So they ended up in foster care. So this is how I ended up in foster care.
Got it.
So adopting that story, but realizing there was a lot of intergenerational trauma that I may have not known of, but I've taken on and have held in my body. And then it didn't make sense till like I learned of their story. So it's a lot. But I'm actually really grateful for all of those experiences and all of those people and their stories.
Yeah. How did you know when you were ready to try to reconnect with your original parents?
Ooh. I think it's always been a thing. So there's like this line of like respecting my mother, of like this, like, I don't, like, you're my mother, and I don't want you to think because I want to connect with like my original parents, like I'm somehow disrespecting you. Right. This is like a whole thing in the adoptee world of like the respect. Okay. But when I was in my teens, I went on to like a board. There's like the adoption, like find your parents board. Sure. And I like, here's my birth name. here's what I know. Born on this day. Expected to hear nothing back.
Right.
I heard nothing back.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Well, good. So you weren't let down.
No.
Perfect.
I heard nothing back. If you keep the bar low, you can never be disappointed.
Yep.
But I then connected with, so meeting, like finding my original mother is like the weirdest experience. Facebook was how that happened. So my sister was like, hey, I think I found your mom, like randomly one morning. I was like, oh, good morning to you too. And she's like, no, like she has your baby picture as her profile picture. And I'm like, what?
Whoa.
Yeah. And so I reached out. I was like, hey, so my sister's like, you're my mom. I don't quite know, but like, you should message me back if you are. And she like messaged me back. I was like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, crap. So like, yeah, like.
You know, like close the computer and
Yeah,
like
there we
go for a walk a bit.
Go for a walk. So I talked about it with friends. Like, I think I found my mom and she has baby pictures of me and it's really, really weird. And when I say it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, the first thing she said to me after really connected, like, you are who you are, is you should be thanking me. And I was like, oh, yep. So we're no longer going to talk. But by the way, before I don't talk to you anymore, who's my father? Just get that. And she gave me a name.
Okay.
And so I, like a week later, I sat on this. I was like, I don't know if I want to look him up, but he had a really unique name. So I was like, okay. So I look him up and I call the phone number list. You can find everything about everyone online. So I found the phone number.
Crazy.
I know. They're like giving out addresses.
So I tell my kids, like,
don't put it online.
Be careful with what you put out there.
Because I called him. I was like, hey. And a woman answered the phone. I was like, oh, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. And she was like, oh, yeah, like, I know him because I'm married to him. Oh, well. And I don't know what she knows, but I'm like, we're just going to drop it all here. Like, I'm shocked. You're shocked. We'll all be shocked together.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, so your husband is my father? And she's like, oh, yeah, I know who you are. What? I'm like looking for like housewife drama, and she's like, "No, we've gone to therapy. Here. Yeah, we've gone to therapy. Like we know." And so, like, so she's like, "Hey, you should come down." So I went down and I visited. Like it was right before COVID hit.
Oh.
So like February, like we knew COVID was a thing, but it was like still on the West Coast. We're like, that's a West Coast problem. So I flew down, and we met. We went to Cheesecake Factory.
Sure.
And yeah, like one does. You just go to Cheesecake Factory. And I invited a friend because I was like, I don't know what I'm about to step into. And he came with his wife, and it was like, hey. And we just had a conversation. It wasn't weird.
That's amazing.
It was great.
It should have been weird.
It wasn't. It was like,
don't you think it should have?
I mean, there were some weird aspects.
Sure. But it could have been really awkward.
It wasn't.
That's amazing.
The Cheesecake Factory to me was a little awkward. It was like, oh, this is the restaurant we pick. Like, they're celebrating their birthday over there with, like, really large margaritas, and we're just, like, sitting here like, hey, you're my father. But it wasn't. Like, it was like, hey, it was great. So then we scheduled to do Thanksgiving, but, like, after COVID. So, like, we did our first Thanksgiving, and COVID's not like gone. I want to make that very clear. But people get really upset when you're like after COVID. I'm like, when things were like not shut down anymore.
Right.
So we did, and he's like, oh, you're Jewish. So like they did a lot of research, like a lot of research. Okay. So I'm like getting text messages like, what is kosher? And I'm like, okay, here's the Chabad side. I'm not Chabad, but like it will cover everything.
Right.
And turns out they're vegans.
Oh.
Yeah, like, but they had made the stress, like the stress level was up here, and I was like, and I opened their fridge. I'm like, you're vegans, and they're like, yeah. I was like,
then we're fine.
It's fine.
We're
like,
fine.
It's fine. But like, they've come up after the birth of my last baby, so it's not been like there's some awkward things.
Sure.
Of like, how did I end up in the foster care system? But like, those are conversations I think will come later.
Yes.
As like the trust gets built, and like I'm like, okay, you're there. You're not gonna like go for milk one day, and like never come back.
Right.
So like, we're building up that trust, but it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah. And I mean, the way your original mother put it, maybe a little abrupt.
Yeah.
Maybe that not so much the right way to say it, but I think like it's possible, like as you learn the stories, you may not just say, oh, gee, thanks.
Oh, no, we've like, yeah.
But like, you may not ever get there, but at least it'll give you maybe a little background into just where she was coming from?
Oh, yes. So back in the 90s, when you were in foster care and you had a baby in foster care, that's the awkward part we don't talk about with my dad.
Okay.
It's like, because you weren't in foster care, so. But yeah. If you had a baby and you were in foster care, a case was opened up on the child you had, whether or not there were any concerns. The only concerns was you happened to be in foster care. And right away, you are, like, monitored. And so she's 16, just had this baby, living in foster care, lost her mother a few years beforehand, and what we now know is postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And she had the inability to take care of me. She had a twin sister, though, who was like, I will help take care of the baby, who was in a different foster home, but they both went to Agape, this school on university that supports pregnant teen parents.
Okay.
So they both went there, and I was a product of that daycare. Unbeknownst to me, I spent time in that daycare. Wow. And so my mom would come to school with me, and my aunt would then take care of me. So she'd, like, give me a bath in the school, like, sink because, like, my mother's inability to take care of me. And then I was like, wait, why were you at Agape? You didn't have a kid. Oh, no, I was pregnant with your cousin. So, like, when I'm going to dump all this trauma on you.
This is...
And so when she gave birth, her foster parents had a very, like, come to Jesus moment with her and said, hey, so, like, you can't take care of your niece anymore because you have your own baby and, like, you're 16.
Right, also.
So that was when the difficult decision was, like, we have to report all that has been going on to CPS. So I was removed. I luckily, though, was with my mother who raised me since that time, which is a very, like, not common story of if you're placed in a foster home, you stay in that foster home for 8 years before you're adopted.
You hear, like, I think for those of us on the outside of the foster care, we hear the stories, most of them not good, of kids bouncing house to house. They turn 18 and then, best of luck.
Yeah, and that's not what happened in my case. I was eligible for adoption.
Okay.
That's the language that is used.
It is, though. It's awkward language as it is.
It's very awkward language. Yes. But I was eligible for adoption when I was 8. And so that is when my mother made the choice to adopt because she said, you're eligible, which meant you were also eligible to bounce house to house to house and, like, try out families and, like, maybe they doesn't work out, so you get returned. It's like adoption of, like, animals, like when you really think about the language that is being used here. So she made the choice to adopt. It was the only home I had known, the only family I had known. So it made sense. She, though, adopted another Jewish child who was also of mixed background. Okay. So that was really interesting. Yeah. I don't know how that happened. Also, like, black single mom in the 90s adopting children, and, like, the state didn't shut that down.
Right. Like, that's another piece of the story. It's like, so against type for the time in the era that we lived in, which was a little more than a generation ago. Yeah. Not that long ago.
I'm like, shut that down. You don't get any more kids.
Right.
But, like, she ended up. And so, like, my Jewishness growing up was we did not eat pork because that is all she knew about Jewish people. Okay. They did not eat pork.
So your Jewishness, your Judaism, comes from your original mother's background, and you have maintained that despite the household you grew up in. And
yes,
that is
again my mother. Like, I am very thankful. It was never a secret that we were in foster care. It was never a secret that we were adopted. It was never a secret that we have family elsewhere. Yeah. Like, this was never, like, she did it right. Like, if you had a case study on how to do it right, she did those things. And I won't say, like, all was rosy, because, like, we had family members who didn't believe in adoption. That's a whole thing. Who didn't believe in adoption. So, like, that was a whole thing. Yeah. But in her home, like, there were no secrets. And so it was, this is who you are. I don't quite understand it. She was evangelical, like, in, like, Church of God in Christ, so very Black historical church. Okay. And so, like, I went to church on Sundays because we weren't allowed to be home. Like, it was like, you're not allowed to be home by yourself on Sunday, so you're going to go to church. But I was allowed to question. Like, you think about the Judaism And, like, the things she allowed, whether or not she knew, like, I was allowed to question our religion.
Yeah.
I was allowed to question things that, like, Pastor said. She always said, like, do not take what someone says as face value. Like, go research, come back, ask more questions. If you're not happy with those questions, ask more questions.
That is like the most Jewish
Right?
thing, too.
So I'm like, oh, we didn't eat pork. That was my Jewishness. But, like, when you think about it, like, she encouraged that. Now, whether or not she knew those were Jewish values,
Right.
it was who she is. And I think as a Black woman, too, there was that aspect of her life of, like, you just don't take what for face value. If you don't get the answers, go find the answers.
Right. Particularly the things that she taught you that she saw back in Little Rock. Mm-hmm. All of those horror stories, right. Like, you can't afford to take anything. You shouldn't take anything at face value.
So, like, when you think about it, I had a very Jewish upbringing,
You really
just
did.
within a Black household. Like, but
From
the
an
stories of
evangelical-
trauma,
yeah.
like, these were these things. Now, there were things within the evangelical church, which is why you say I am very staunch and I do not waver down of, like, do question evangelical church players when they say they stand for you. Because I sat in a church where it was, we'll bring all the Jews to Israel and they'll die. I mean, it wasn't said that way. You had to read between the lines. But, like, that's what was said. Now, did my mother co-sign that? She never co-signed that to me, but it was what was preached from a pulpit.
Right.
But she, like, through all of that, she raised very Jewish children. It's very interesting. I did affirmation, which is not a requirement of when you are, when your mother is Jewish. So affirmation is, hey, I found out I'm Jewish.
Okay.
But I was not raised in community. But halakhically, I am Jewish.
Yes.
So that was something. I didn't have to do it. I could have went to Chabad and be like, I'm Jewish. And they were like, yay. And then we were like, yay. But, like, I did it because I wanted to understand.
Right.
And also the breaking down of the covert, like, anti-Semitism that I had been raised in, whether or not that was on purpose within the church.
Sure.
So there was very intentional. And my observation has waved up and down. Like, my boys, they speak modern Hebrew. Like, that was a choice. Because I didn't know where I was going with my Jewishness, but I knew I wanted them to be able to speak Hebrew. They are Jewish. But I'm more observant now, and that has come out of trauma and pain. George Floyd, I think, was kind of that trigger for me. So we have 2 kitchens. We have a dairy and meat kitchen. We are very observant in our household. We're at a Reform temple. So, like, put that together. But yeah, my upbringing has a huge hand in who I am as a Jewish person today.
At what point, as you got older and started learning, more about, Judaism in general, but, like, at what point did you sort of immerse yourself in community?
Ooh. So a little bit of it happened when my kids went to kindergarten. Because they're at the Agamim. The Hebrew charter, public charter school, and that was done very on purpose. And I had done affirmation, was kind of in and out. Like, we didn't light Shabbat candles, but, like, Friday, Saturday, I was like, we're not going to do anything. And we had Jewish families, of course, like, who was sending their children to a Hebrew immersion school.
Sure.
Like, even if it's a public school.
Right.
So a majority of the kids at the time were Jewish children. And with the moms, it was kind of my gateway of, like, let me, like, see what's going on over here. And at the time, we lived in St. Louis Park. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, it does connect that way.
So I was given this window of Jewishness and of Jewish living.
Okay.
And I had some Jewish friends who are very secular and some who were very observant. And so there was, like, that. And then we didn't officially join a shul till the shul we were at, and that was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So we kind of visited in and out, in and out, in and out. But we officially joined. We're at Mount Zion.
Oh, sure.
And we officially joined 2 years ago. Like, and this was after visiting a little bit, in and out.
Yeah.
But it was also, like, with the kids. Like, kid life is busy. So it was just
Kid
like,
life is busy.
I don't want to add one more thing to my plate. But then the boys are, like, getting towards bar mitzvah age. I'm like, religious education's really important. Maybe we should go. But at the time when we joined, we were in Rochester. So I lived in Rochester, Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're doing the math right now.
That's,
That is a 3-hour round trip. So we did that for 2 years.
Okay.
And we recently have moved to St. Paul. I
Okay.
grew up in St. Paul, so I'm returning home. But that decision was actually made surrounding our shul life.
Okay.
And so now we're able to walk.
That's really
Yeah,
nice.
like we're like really, really close.
Great neighborhood that it's in, too.
I love the neighborhood.
Love the neighborhood.
I love it. But so it was about 2 years ago where we like really jumped in and dived. And my husband's not Jewish.
Okay.
So like he like when we first met, I was like, hey, I'm Jewish. And he likes to point out on your profile, you said you were Jewish, but you weren't really observant. And now we have 2 kitchens. And I'm like, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? I'm like, I said a lot of other things on my profile. It was Tinder. Like, you can elaborate. And so, like, but he's been a really good, like, supporter of the Jews. Like, he doesn't quite understand it all.
Yeah.
But, like, I remember I was like, so, hon, I like to really keep kosher. And he was like, I can't have meat anymore. I'm like, that's vegetarian.
Right.
Very different.
So close.
Like, it was a crisis. I was like, no, hon, we're going to separate.
Listen, you're talking to somebody who grew up Jewish, went to day school. I don't understand it all a lot of times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and
I don't
he's
think
like
we're
here.
meant to.
No.
Not even a little bit.
You're meant to debate it.
Yes.
You just debate it.
Yes.
So, like, he's been a really, like, he keeps kosher. And the guy keeps kosher even when he's outside of our home. So, like, I'm like, that's commitment because I would never make that. Like, if I was not Jewish, I would never make that commitment. And, like, he keeps kosher to the home. Like, his family will come over and visit. He's like, you can't have that in the house. Like, Iola will probably murder you. So, like,
Go sit on the curb and eat that.
No, we've had family members sit in the backyard and eat food that they brought over. And I'm like, yeah, because it can't be in the house. So, like, he's learning. He's learning. It's been really, he drops the kids off at religious school and I'm out of town. And it's really interesting. Like, he's like, I sit in the synagogue and people want to talk to me and I don't know what to talk about. He's like, because I'm not Jewish. I'm like, you don't have to be Jewish to, like, talk about things. Like,
just have a conversation.
Yeah, how's your day,
Right.
Theo? Like, it's nothing deep.
Right.
So, but then it turns out we invited his brother over for Hanukkah. And we're doing the blessings as we're lighting the candles. And his brother is reciting the blessings. And I'm like, sir, how do you know these blessings? I'm thinking it's like a messianic weirdness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So his family, so all of my husband's family, except my husband, have gone to West Point.
Oh.
And his, very military family.
Okay.
And his brother was the Shabbat Goy for the West Point, like, Jewish cadets.
Oh, my God.
And so because they were raised Methodist, but they don't really practice. And so he was like, well, it was either I had to go to church and I didn't want to do that, so I had to do something. And so he was like, I became the Shabbat Goy for the Jewish students. And then they're like, oh, you have a great voice. You should join our Jewish choir. And he learned all of the prayers. So he knows all the prayers.
That's amazing.
And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, so you guys reciting those prayers? He's like, it was like going back in time of this time where I was deeply immersed in Jewish culture.
Incredible.
So, like, it's great. Like, and people ask, like, do we have an interfaith household? No. That was the other, like, non-compromisable.
Yeah.
There was the one year we did fight over the secular Christmas tree.
Okay.
We had the fight. I learned this is a fight in many households in which both parents are not Jewish.
Yeah.
And it's a Charlie Brown secular Christmas tree. I didn't quite understand why he wanted to put the stupid tree up.
Okay.
It's a tree that's small enough that he does not take it down after the holiday.
That's called a plant.
Yeah. But it's fake. But like,
listen, fake plants are the best ones because you can't kill those.
But like, it's so sad looking. Like, I'm like, why? Like, if you're gonna put up a tree, make that tree grand. Like, it's so sad looking. It's like a bush. But that was like our first, and like that never, because I insulted the tree. It wasn't because I refused it. It was like I insulted that tree. I was like, it's a stupid tree.
The tree's not worth it.
No, it's not worth
about
the fight.
A tree.
No,
it's that tree.
That tree is not worth it. And we moved. The tree didn't come with.
Yeah.
It went into a dumpster. Like, but you took all the ornaments. The ornaments are really cute. I want to find a display to like,
sure,
because it's like grandkids and like things like that. And I'm like, okay, you should keep that. The tree was hideous.
You're right.
But we're a very Jewish household. He is just along for the ride, and he's ride or die. And like he had COVID, and he like sat in the basement. I banished him to the basement, and he read like the Israel book by Noah Tishby.
Oh,
like.
yeah.
And he emerged from the basement. He's like, I think I understand Israel. And I'm like, no, you read one book. We don't understand Israel even. No. But thank you. So like he's learning. Like he is learning.
That's amazing.
And it's really great.
Okay, so this conversation went off the rails after about 5 minutes, and that's great, and I'm totally cool with it because this has been phenomenal. The one other thing that you recently got involved in that I wanted to talk to you about is the Jews of Color Community Organizing Fellowship that you're part of. Yeah.
Oh, I'm almost triggered.
I'm sorry. Do we not want to talk about that?
No, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Let's talk about it because I think there's an important message that comes out of this.
Please.
So yes, I am involved in JOIN. So it's ran by the Justice Organizing Institute, Networking Institute, something like that.
Jewish Organizing Institute
Yes,
Network.
that one. Yeah.
Look, don't be too impressed. I have it up on my computer screen.
Like,
I didn't just pull this out of my, where.
So I don't want to get into the details. I will just say we are not okay.
Okay.
In that fellowship. So like on a serious note, I think there's something to be said on when we as organizations and foundations, so people who give money to organizations and earmark that money for specific things, and one of the earmarks or conditions of said money is we don't talk about Israel. Because that is exactly what's happening in this fellowship. I'm like, how do I not get into too many details, but like this needs to be talked about. So this fellowship started off really, really great. We went to Pearlstone in Baltimore.
Oh, sure.
So the Jewish retreat. And like, I love it because I have chickens. So I felt like at home. They have like chickens and sheep and like a farm, and it's great. And we all bonded last May. So it's about 10, 15 of us. I know it's a really wide range, but I can't remember.
It's all right.
And it was great. It was like everyone of color. Everyone's a Jew of color, and it's great. I don't like using the term Jew of color because it implies that Jews are white. Like there's a subset of white Jews. I don't like it. We don't teach ethnicity in this country in a proper way. No, but that's a whole other conversation.
Whole different thing.
Whole other conversation. But so everyone, I would say, is a non-white presenting Ashkenazi Jew. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And it was great. It was like a kumbaya. I like came back and made a reel about it. It was like, this is great. My baby came with. It was amazing. It was a very sacred, holy space. Then October 7th happened. And I think many of us felt this and lived this. I just did not expect to feel it in a Jewish organization. But then I later learned Jewish organizations were not immune from this feeling. And there was one comment in our chat group of hope everyone's okay. But that was the extent of the comment. Hope everyone's okay. I'm like, none of us are in Israel, so that's a really weird comment. And I was reeling because like the night before I was at our temple and we're dancing Shema Torah, and like all of my kids had croup except the baby. And so like my job that night was to make sure she didn't like run through the Torah scroll.
Oh, God, as it's all unfurled. Yeah, that's
like, don't run through. Don't. And of course, we all woke up October 7th, and I usually try to keep Shabbat, so I really try not to be on my phone. But I was on my phone. My phone was blowing up. WhatsApp was blowing up. Instagram was blowing up. And what came was, I hope everyone's okay in that group chat. We had not talked about Israel. Yeah. I will put it this way. The way the fellowship is going now, and I don't want to dog it because it seems like whenever like anyone of color gets involved in anything, there's almost like this exceptionalism that we have to do in order to prove that like we can do the things, or this excellentness.
Yeah.
But things are not okay. We're going through it. The demographics more on the younger side, and our younger fellows are very, 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 and in some ways violently anti-Israel. And so we had a retreat shortly after October 7th.
This is planned already?
It was already planned.
Okay.
And it did not go well.
No.
It did not go well. And it's not to say JOIN did not try. They brought in facilitators, but it's really hard to have these conversations when half of your fellowship does not want to participate or not be there because they have things to do protesting-wise.
Right.
And we're still not okay. My experience, because I can speak on my experience.
Please.
My experience is being told and given feedback that I am too much of a Zionist. I don't know how that works. And there also has to be this thing of reclaiming Zionism. Like, we have too many people out here in this world and on Beyonce's internet defining Zionism for us,
Right.
but who don't speak a drop of Hebrew, don't speak our mother tongue, do not practice any of our practices, who are trying to tell us what Zionism means. It's the self-determination of the Jewish people, point blank, and they're it. But I was too much of a Zionism. So apparently I believe too much in the Jewish people. I didn't know you could do that too much. And that they'd like me to tone it down. Again, making very clear, it was not Join who said this. It was other fellows who have expressed this. And my only thoughts of Zionism given within the group is given my family history. I would not be here if it was not for the state of Israel. I would not be here. But my very existence disrupts this narrative when we talk about Israel of the opponents are it's a colonizing state of white settlers. And then you look at me and you're like, oh shit, that doesn't work. So like there's that. Like I did a DNA test, like the spiciness of the whiteness in me is like from Spain and Portugal, which is to be expected.
Right.
So it's very interesting. I disrupt that narrative. And that disruption has landed me in this gray space within the fellowship and outside the fellowship, especially in Jew of color spaces and in just general BIPOC spaces of because I disrupt a narrative, there is no place where I belong. Because apparently you can't be pro-Black if you're not pro-Palestine, yet we don't want to talk about how Black trauma is being perverted to say we must accept a narrative of another people that has nothing to do with our trauma here in America. And within non-BIPOC spaces, so like JVP, for example, they just won't talk to me. Like it just... They're like, nope, we can't touch. Because either it gets really anti-Semitic or real racist real fast.
Yeah.
And anti-Semitism mixed with racism is a whole nother level of weirdness.
Yeah.
Like I've been told, myself and others have been messaged, you as a monkey should have been gassed with the others. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's a whole, there's a lot going on there.
Whoa.
And I'm like, so when you say monkey, like, do you mean Black people? Like, who are we calling monkey here? Like, can we unpack that real quick? Like, I almost want to unpack the racism with them along with the anti-Semitism. But then they're like, you go to their profile and it's like, Black Lives Matter. It's really interesting. So when it comes to that fellowship, that's really what's come out of it. I had hopes. I probably won't be going to our last retreat. It'll be held in Berkeley. And as someone who outwardly identified, like when you look at me, you can tell something's going on. Like I'm more than just Black. You're like, oh, there's like a Star of David. You wear Sudra. Like there's stuff going on there. I'm outwardly Jewish.
Yes.
And to be put in a space that working in the ADL, I get to see the incidents. We talk about these incidents. And to be put in an area that as of right now seems very anti-Jewish. Yeah. It's not going to work. I'm like, I can't show up to that space. Sorry. So I probably won't be showing up to the last retreat. And that sucks.
It does.
But I don't think I'm missing much. Do I want to be in a space where my fellows don't like me or don't know how to have conversation with me? No. Do I want to put my baby in that space because she travels with me? No. That's energy I don't need. But yeah, it's a fellowship I'm in that, has...
And there's an outward hostility towards you and who you are that you don't need that.
I don't need that. I get enough of that already. Like I can do that in person. I'm like, I can do that in person. I don't need
to fly cross country for that. I can get that right here at home.
I can get right here, right in my neighborhood. Like St. Paul had a ceasefire passed. Did any of those city council members talk to any, like they say they talk to constituents. It's really funny because I reached out several times. No one reached out back to me. But like even within my own neighborhood, we have 5 signs that are, divest from Israel or Israel's an apartheid state. And I can't put up my own sign.
No.
There's no way I am putting up my own sign when one of those signs are 2 houses down from me. These signs are on our route to our synagogue that we walk during Shabbat. We have protests down the street from our synagogue every Friday. They're quite lovely. They claim they didn't pick Friday. It just happened to be the day, just happened to be during when people would be going to the shul. I can get that in my own neighborhood. Like I'm like, I can sit at home and get all of that in my own neighborhood. And raising children who are trying to navigate this.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for the choices of like, we're at that Hebrew immersion school.
Yeah.
They're shielded from a lot of what's going on in these schools. And I'm very happy now of the sacrifices we made to keep them there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can get that in my own neighborhood. Just open my door, yell, I'm Jewish, and like I get it all.
Yeah, but you don't get frequent flyer miles though.
No. Can you imagine like if I had a punch card?
Oh God.
And like every time I get punched, like, oh, anti-Semitism, can you punch right here?
Right.
And then like redeem it for like coffee or
all
like
those
a
coffee
vacation.
all those coffee meetings, you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah,
It'd be
I don't
great.
have to pay for it. It'd be great.
Iola Kostrzewski, this has been a fascinating, like deep,
Yeah,
wide ranging. We went everywhere. This is the kind of podcast I love. And also, you talked about like you love organizing because you get to hear stories, and that is so much of why I love not just being a journalist, but the podcast in general, is that we get to do storytelling, and it's just so fun getting to know people. And so the final couple questions, which will take a wild left turn from where we've been.
Oh, okay. Where are we going?
First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say Sukkot. And it's like a very selfish reason.
Okay.
So like I'm super excited this year because like we're in the city. The last few years we've been in Rochester, so we build our sukkah and like no one comes.
Right.
Like because there's no one there. It's not because like lack of trying. Like we'll go on next door and be like, hey, we have a sukkah up, and a lot of it's also so we don't get complaints from the neighbors. But this year, because our sukkah was looking real rough.
Yeah.
But this year, like we're getting a proper sukkah.
Ah.
And like I want to put it in the backyard with our chickens. So like I want like a farm theme.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like I'm super, and then we have I garden.
Okay.
So like we'll have a garden. So like that is and then we get to be outside. Like you get to eat outside, sit outside, as long as we don't get snow.
Yes.
It'll be great.
I love that it's March and you're already
I'm already planning. I'm already there.
You're
like,
7 months down the road.
I am
and
past
you are
Purim and Passover. I'm there. I'm already there.
Incredible. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
I don't know. Okay, what constitutes a Jewish food? Because I have 2 answers. I get into a debate about kugel.
Okay.
Okay, people are like, "Ooh, kugel's really, really great," and I'm like, "I've had a lot of kugel. It's not necessarily, but I want to petition that mac and cheese, to bake mac and cheese, is a version of savory kugel."
I'll allow it.
Okay, so that would be like that
it's
one.
noodles, it's cheese,
Yes.
it's a crumb topping of some sort on top.
Yeah.
I'll allow
So
it.
it works. Though everyone's like, I will feed you my kugel and you will like it. And I'm like, I just want some baked mac and cheese. We'll call it.
We're going to call it kugel. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll accept it.
And then another one, I'm trying to like where, it's one that I do. We do saffron rice
Okay.
in my house. So saffron rice, and depending on if it's a meat day, we'll do chicken or like goat and lamb. And if it's not, then it's just the rice and whatever vegetable we want to pair with it. I think that would be like my favorite. It's not a common one because it's more of the Mediterranean, North African, like Middle Eastern aspect. But I would say like that is. But if I had to pick like an Ashkenazi food, Hamantashen? Is that Hamantashen?
Yeah.
Like the triangle?
Yeah, Hamantashen.
Those are cool. My kids don't like them. Like my
Really? Yeah. They're cookies with a filling.
But they have never really been exposed to them. So we have like a sesame cookie that we do.
Okay.
And so it's really great, like a sesame cracker.
Yeah.
But like my kids made Hamantashen at like the temple the other day. And like they made them. They participated. And then they gave them to me and said, I don't want them.
Really?
Yes.
Wild.
But I like them. I ate them.
What's your favorite flavor?
Apricot.
My wife's favorite also.
But I need someone to do a peaches one. I don't really like apricot's a little too tart, but like I want like more of like a sweet,
peach
yeah,
filling.
peach.
Okay. Interesting.
Those are a lot of answers.
There's a lot of answers. I will tell you, those last two questions, what I always end on, and it like people try to figure out how many things they can cram. Like they look for the loopholes to cram a bunch of things
loopholes.
in.
So I did
No,
the
that's
loopholes.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. I like loopholes. Iola Kostrzewski, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This is great.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.